Have you ever dreamt of living a different life, of being somewhere else, anywhere else, where the grass is greener, the food is better, somewhere more fun and exciting, where you have everything that you've ever wanted? The perfect life. But in the stop-motion movie Coraline, this perfect life isn't just a hopeful dream, it becomes reality when a young girl stumbles across a parallel world, which is similar to her own, but with everything that she's ever wanted. At first anyway.
You may come out when you've learned to be a loving daughter.
Now, like many people, this movie really creeped me out as a kid. It falls into that category of movies where you can tell they probably had to push to get the age rating that they did, because this movie gets pretty dark at points. And also because of other reasons. But like many great movies, Coraline's origins don't lie on the screen, they lie on the page. Coraline the movie is actually an adaptation of a book written by Neil Gaiman. However, unlike most adaptations, Coraline is one of the rare cases in which I think you'll find few people saying the famous line, "The book did it better." And this isn't because the book is underwhelming, I mean it won awards. It was read in schools all throughout England. It's because the stop-motion movie is also such a timeless classic. I mean it won awards. It was played in schools all throughout England, when the teachers gave up on trying to get the students to read. So we have a fantastic book and a fantastic movie. But what if I told you that these aren't the only ways to experience Coraline's story? Because there's actually a third version, which is often left out of the conversation. The Coraline graphic novel, which was released just a year before the movie. So why isn't it talked about? And what is it that makes the movie hold up just as much today as it did in 2009? Well, I thought it would be fun to go back and take a look at each version of Coraline and see how they differ from one another. What are their strengths, their weaknesses? Because each of these projects does a pretty good job of showcasing what makes their respective mediums unique. All of these versions have the same skeleton. The same big events play out in each. But how might the experience change when telling it through motion picture compared to still images or the written word? Well, let's dive into the creepiest kids movie ever made and find out.
You know I love you.
But first, who is this Coraline? Well, Coraline is a young girl, just 11 years old, whose life seems to be as mundane as one can get. At the beginning of the story, her parents have just uprooted her life by moving away from her home state and all of her friends to a remote house far away. And like many children, Coraline isn't exactly reacting well to all of this change. She misses her friends, her old life.
Don't forget about me, guys.
But more than that, there just isn't that much to do around this place. No fun to be had. In the first 3 chapters of the book, Coraline says the words "I'm bored" in every single one. And they're pretty much all spent describing Coraline's endless attempts to entertain herself, without much luck.
4 incredibly boring windows.
But probably the best look into Coraline's character comes through a chapter in which her mother takes her shopping for new school clothes. And during the shopping spree, Coraline spots a pair of bright green gloves that she desperately wants. But her mother refuses, instead getting her the standard school uniform: white socks, navy blue school underpants, 4 grey blouses and a dark grey shirt. All extremely neutral colours, colours which don't stand out. Not like these neon green gloves do. So it seems that what Coraline really wants is to be seen, to, just like these gloves, stand out. And this is proven further by her signature outfit and look. A bright yellow raincoat with bright yellow boots with bright blue hair. Even Coraline's name sounds like it's trying to stand out. Everyone she meets keeps calling her Caroline, because that's what they expect her to be called.
До свидания, Caroline.
Coraline.
It's the new neighbor, Miriam. Caroline.
But no, she's Coraline, a name so rare that I'd guess most people have never met anyone who has it, and probably never will, because it's not really a name that exists. At least not before this movie came out. It's like a name from a parallel world, where the name Caroline never existed. And all of this, the bright clothes, the unique name, just help to make Coraline stand out completely from her surroundings, which, just like those school clothes, are incredibly mundane and dull. And this is where I think the movie really shines. You take one look at her new home and just feel sad. It's like all of the colour has been sucked out of this place, like there's a grey wash over everything. All of the surrounding plants and trees are dead, and the sky is constantly storm grey. So when the movie opens with Coraline simply exploring the grounds in her yellow coat and yellow boots and bright blue hair, you feel like she doesn't belong in this place, like she belongs somewhere else, somewhere more fun, with more colour than here. But it's not just the environment, it feels like Coraline doesn't even belong in her own family. When talking about her parents, she refers to them as boring computer people that don't really seem to get her.
I meant my parents. They don't listen to me either.
Coraline wants fun, colourful gloves. They get her boring grey uniform. Coraline wants fun, tasty food, the kind that kids like, say pizza. Her father makes her slimy, ambitious dishes, the kind that grown-ups like. Coraline loves mud. Her parents hate mud.
No, Coraline, rain makes mud. Mud makes a mess.
And once again, you can tell just how different Coraline and her parents are, just from looking at their character designs. Her parents are dressed in that neutral grey and black clothing. Her dad's skin even looks grey, and boy is that man going through it. I feel you, bud. So unlike Coraline, they clearly do belong in this grey world. It's really simple, but really effective visual storytelling, which is what I think a movie adaptation should be aiming for. Taking the story we know and using these visual elements like colour and character design to help emphasise the themes. Because, of course, books aren't visual media, they're written word, so the book has to take a different approach when getting across all of the differences between Coraline and her parents. And they decide to do it through the dialogue, how her and her parents interact with one another. When Coraline and her mother are on their shopping trip, the pair are talking, but it's very clear that they're not really having a conversation. They're having two separate conversations about two completely separate things. Her mother is talking about hair clips, whilst Coraline is making up some grand, exciting story about aliens and other worlds. They're not on the same page at all. And it's not just this interaction, almost every conversation that Coraline has in the real world isn't really a conversation. You see, the house that Coraline's family are moving into, the Pink Palace, doesn't entirely belong to them. It's been split up into multiple apartments, each one taking up a single floor, and her family are moving in to just one of these floors. Above them lives a mysterious, eccentric man who talks about the mice he's been training for his mice circus.
My new songs go oompa, oompa, but the jumping mice play only toodle toot like that.
And below them lives Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, an elderly couple who once were performers but now spend their days talking about tea leaves and taking care of their little doggies. Aww. And pretty much the first thing we read when we open the book are interactions with these neighbours, which play out almost exactly like this talk with her mother. Conversations which aren't conversations. These neighbours spewing out whatever is on their mind, talking as though Coraline has asked them a question, when she hasn't. In both cases, all Coraline did was correct them on her name.
Coraline.
But they don't hear this, or take it in. Instead, they just talk as if they would if Coraline wasn't even there, and continue to address her as Caroline. But there is one person who Coraline does seem to have actual conversations with, a back and forth dialogue, and that's Wyborn, or YB for short.
I'm YB. YB Lovat.
Whitey?
Short for Wyborn.
YB is a relative of the woman who owns the house, and the reason that he and Coraline actually seem to have conversations, despite them not always being friendly ones, is because YB is also a child. So the two have common ground, as he seems to still have a sense of childlike wonder and adventure.
It's supposed to be so deep. If you fell to the bottom and looked up, you see a sky full of stars in the middle of the day.
Now, YB is actually only found in the movie adaptation, but I think its addition to the story is actually a really great one, because it shows the disconnect that Coraline feels, not only with her parents, but with the older generation as a whole. It's not just that she feels out of place, it's that she feels like all of the adults in her life don't seem to understand her, that they're neglectful. And it's easy to agree with Coraline on this, because the story is told from her perspective, and we're only given a small small glimpse into what her relationship with these adults, and more specifically her parents, is like. Carefully chosen to make her side with Coraline, to agree that her parents are in fact boring computer people. In all of the early interactions Coraline has with her parents, almost all of them are very brief and end with Coraline being told to get out of their hair, to leave them alone.
Coraline, I don't have time for you right now. And you still have unpacking to do. Lots of unpacking.
Let me work.
And so when all we see are these interactions, we think, oh, they must not care about Coraline all that much. Look how dismissive of her they're being. But to be honest, haven't all of us had an interaction like this with our parents at some point? Them telling us to get out of their hair because they're busy? Taken out of context, they do seem like neglectful parents, but that's the point. To make Coraline's regular, everyday life feel as dull and grey as possible. And to make her parents seem as dull and grey as possible, so that you fully understand why she might want to escape this world. Go to one that's more fun, more colourful. And that's exactly what happens. While exploring their new home, Coraline finds a door. A door which at first seems to go nowhere, just a brick wall as soon as you open it. But later that night, when Coraline is in bed, she's woken up by a mouse, and when she follows the mouse to the door and opens it, the bricks are gone, revealing a long passage which, when followed, takes Coraline to another world. Now, in the book, this passage seems fairly normal, aside from the disappearing bricks. It's just described as a dark corridor. But in the movie, when Coraline looks down this passage, it glows with shades of blue and purple. It's really the first flash of colour, aside from Coraline herself, that we see in the whole movie. It's like she's finally found something that matches her, that was specifically made for her. And so it's not surprising that she immediately becomes entranced by this passage. I mean, I want to crawl down that thing, and I'm 35. And this is probably the biggest difference between the book and the movie, and what I think the movie does overall a better job of, and that's making the other world feel as alluring as possible. You really believe that this place is perfect, that it's everything a kid would ever want. It's the complete opposite of her mundane, boring world back home, in every way. The kitchen isn't grey, it's bathed in this warm orange light. It feels inviting and cozy. The garden isn't dead, it's vibrant and full of life. But the biggest difference between this world and Coraline's comes in the form of her parents.
Mom? What are you doing here in the middle of the night?
You're just in time for supper, dear.
These new parents, or other parents as they call themselves, are fun. They cook up a feast with a literal gravy train that makes its way around the table. If Coraline wants a milkshake, there's one already waiting. But more than the fun, they bombard Coraline with the one thing she wants: to feel seen. These other parents almost never stop looking at Coraline, to the point where it's unsettling. They're always standing at attention, like they exist just for her.
See you soon.
This world seems perfect, and so naturally, Coraline gets swept up by it. She can't wait to go back. But as the movie goes on, it becomes clear that this world isn't all that it seems. Cracks start appearing in a seemingly perfect image, because while at first, the other mother refers to herself and the other father as, well, her other mother and her other father, it's not long until she starts referring to them as just her parents. And then it becomes better parents.
I'm your other mother, silly.
Would you go fetch your father? You mean my other father?
Your better father, dear.
These small hints of possessiveness are starting to creep through. But this place is so wonderful that it almost seems like Coraline doesn't want to see these cracks. She doesn't want to ask questions about this place. Questions like, why does it exist? How can it be so perfect? And what's the price of staying here? Instead, she lets the wool be pulled over her eyes. But in the book, from the moment that Coraline steps into this other world, she is immediately very hesitant of it. And for good reason. The other mother in the book looks pretty different different from her own mother right from the get-go. And I don't just mean the fact that she has buttons for eyes, but everything about the other mother seems different. Coraline noting how she looks a little like her mother, only her skin is white as paper, only she's taller and thinner. Only her fingers are too long and they never stop moving. So Coraline is immediately skeptical of everything about this place. And it's not even really like Coraline is a smarter character in the book. It's just that there are way more signs that this new wonderful world might not be so wonderful. And if I'm being honest, I think it's a little too obvious from the get-go. There's almost too many warning signs. The only good things really are the fun toys and the juicy, moist chicken. These seem to be the only things that Coraline actually likes about this world. Everything else kinda weirds her out. When her other father asks her if she likes it here, Coraline replies, "I suppose." Not exactly enthusiastic, because again, there's way more red flags than green. And personally, I think the reveal of what this place really is more impactful when this world seems perfect at first, like it does in the movie. I think it should be more than just an interesting night.
You do like it here, don't you, Coraline?
Uh-huh.
And it's not just the way the other world is presented that's different from the book to the movie, but also Coraline herself is actually a pretty different character, I'd say, mainly when it comes to how reactive she is. Book Coraline is pretty nonchalant, which is part of the reason she doesn't get swept up in the glamour of this other world. It just doesn't impress her that much. There's a part of the story where the other versions of Coraline's neighbours, other Miss Spink and other Miss Forcible, put on a marvellous show where they do all kinds of acrobatics.
How express and admirable in action.
And in the movie, Coraline loves this show. In fact, she doesn't just love it, she gets involved, swinging about with them. It's the cherry on top of an already wonderful evening.
Oh yeah, they swooped down and pulled me right out of my seat. I was flying through the air and it was magic.
But in the book, she seems to find this show strange, and leaves after only a few minutes. And through one of the dogs in the audience, we learn that this show is happening forever and always. So it seems more like Coraline just happened to walk into it. She's even questioned as soon as she enters where her ticket is, and is scolded when she doesn't have one. The whole experience isn't exactly making her feel welcome. And the reason why I think it's important that Coraline leave this show beaming is that right after is when we get the big reveal, when her other parents pose the big question, in which they sit Coraline down at the dining table and tell her if she wants to stay in this perfect world with all this fun and joy and colour, then all she has to do is have buttons sewn into her eyes.
Black is traditional. But if you'd prefer pink or vermilion, it's your decision, darling. We only want what's best for you.
And it's in this moment when Coraline realises that this place isn't as wonderful as she once thought. That the reason why her other parents are being so nice is because they're buttering her up for this morbid request.
Soon you'll see things our way.
It's the moment the mask slips, but in the book, the mask has kinda always been off. It's not a massive issue, and admittedly, it is a subjective one, because I can definitely understand someone preferring the book's approach, as by seeing all of the warning signs from the beginning, and by being more skeptical, it makes Coraline seem less naive. But remember, Coraline is just 11 years old, and that's the benefit of having a child lead. You can have them be swept up by a place like this, and have them ignore all of these red flags, and it doesn't come across as unbelievable, and it doesn't make you hate the character, because we're more lenient on these kind of things when it comes to children. Of course a child would be entranced in a magic world like this. I mean, I probably would too, and I'm 45. And it's not just the button proposition scene, but the actual story structure itself is quite different. In the movie, Coraline goes to the other world, has a lovely dinner, goes to bed, and wakes up back in the real world. Then, the next night, she goes back to the other world, is swept away by a magical performance designed just for her, goes to bed, and once again wakes up in the real world. Then she goes back for a third time, has an even more magical night with yet another magical performance, and when she's at the height of her love for this place, beaming with joy.
You do like it here, don't you, Coraline?
Uh-huh.
This is the moment the other mother decides to pose the big question. But in the book, this proposition actually takes place on Coraline's first night in the other world, right after this strange performance which she leaves early. And so she hasn't really had a chance to be entranced by this place yet, she hasn't had the time. And again, personally, I think it's more impactful when Coraline chooses to come back to this place over multiple nights. It makes it feel like she's affecting the narrative more, and it makes the villain of the story, the other mother, feel way more intelligent and terrifying, because she's laying this perfect trap and it's working. Coraline is being sucked into it. She isn't forcing Coraline to come back, Coraline is choosing to walk into this trap without knowing it. Watching the movie, there was a small part of me that thought maybe she will accept this offer because of just how much fun she's had here. But I never even thought for a second that she would accept it when reading the book. Now, I've watched this movie so many times that I never really stopped to think, why do the characters in the other world have buttons for eyes? I mean, it looks great, and it's maybe the most iconic part of Coraline, but why buttons? And I admit that this could be a bit of a reach, but my theory is that it's because the eyes are considered the windows into the soul, which of course is just an expression, but there's a reason we say look me in the eyes when you suspect someone is lying. The eyes can be very revealing. They can tell the truth when someone isn't. And so maybe if the other mother had real eyes, Coraline would be far quicker to see through the illusions, to see this place for what it really is, and to see her for what she really is. So the other mother uses buttons instead. But even if this explains why the other mother has buttons for eyes, it doesn't explain why she wants Coraline to have buttons for eyes. What could she gain from Coraline agreeing to this? Well, despite there being many characters who call the other world home, other versions of everyone that Coraline knows, the only one who actually has any control or power here is the other mother. Even her other father has no say in what happens, he's simply a puppet.
Only one key.
And so by Coraline agreeing to this procedure, it will signify her complete submission to this other world. Once she has buttons for eyes, she will belong here, become just a puppet, like everyone else under the control of the other mother. It's like an initiation ritual.
You're not sewing buttons in my eyes!
Oh, but we need a yes if you want to stay here.
But even if, say, Coraline did decide she wants to stay here forever with all of this fun and excitement, she'd still be getting conned. Because once you accept the offer and give in to this place, the other mother has no more need for all of this fun and excitement. Because she doesn't actually want Coraline here so she can give her this perfect life. That's just to get her through the door. What she really wants is to consume her. Coraline isn't the first child to be trapped here, and she isn't the first to be posed this question either, because there were 3 children who came before her, the first dating back to over 100 years ago, and all of these children gave in. They agreed to have their eyes taken.
So we let her sew the buttons.
And once they did, the other mother
Ate up our lives.
So this is the price of all this non-stop fun. Nothing is perfect, and although her other mother says she loves her so much, and wants nothing more than to spend time with her, she also wants to harm and mutilate her. Her love is possessive and controlling. It's the same kind of love that an animal has for its food. It isn't unconditional, it loves what you can provide. Coraline describing it as the same way a dragon loves gold. So she defies her other mother. And in doing so, she's learned a valuable lesson about appearances and how they can be deceiving, which is what this whole story is about. Because while her real parents may be boring, and they certainly aren't perfect, the more you think about it, and the more we learn about them, the more it becomes clear that they do actually care for Coraline, in the important ways. The little things, which at first glance go unnoticed. Like how when Coraline asks her mother why she locked the door to the other world if she doesn't even believe in it in the first place.
So what do you think's in the other apartment?
Not a family of Jones imposters.
Then why'd you lock the door?
And her mother replies how she saw signs of rats, and she didn't want Coraline feeling unsafe with rodents running around the house.
I found some rat crap, and I thought you'd feel safer.
Or how, like, in the book, when Coraline is about to head off exploring, her mother makes sure to tell her to wrap up warm and not wander too far. So her parents may not be fun piano players or the best cooks in the world, but when it comes down to it, it's clear that they care. And as we learn more about them, you start to look back at these early interactions between Coraline and her parents and see them under a different light. Yes, her parents are dismissive of her, but in both of these scenes, they are working to provide for her. Admittedly, they could go about telling her they're busy in a different way, but it is a reasonable thing they're asking. So it seems that her parents aren't actually neglectful, they just don't give her everything she wants when she wants it. But to a kid like Coraline, who does want everything, these fun toys, all this excitement, attention, as most kids do, it's no surprise that she sees her real parents as these boring villains getting in the way of her fun. But establishing boundaries and setting limits, like how Coraline's mother does with the green gloves and the school uniform, are good lessons. They may leave Coraline feeling hurt in the short term, but in the long term, this will make her into a more well-rounded person, to help her see that she can't have whatever she wants when she wants it. Which I think is exactly the kind of lesson that a parent should instill into their children. So something which seems sour can really be sweet, and something which seems sweet can really be sour. But it's only through exposure that we can see something for what it really is. Because holding up appearances takes effort. Throughout the story, Coraline has several conversations with a black cat who roams the property, and has the ability to move between the two worlds as he wishes.
You must be the other cat.
I'm not the other anything. I'm me.
And during one of these conversations, we learn that the other mother may have created this world.
She only made what she knew would impress you.
Or if she didn't create it, she at least controls it. It appears as she wants it to look. Which is why it's so catered towards Coraline specifically. It's like it's meant for her to slide right into. When Coraline is walking past her other parents' bedroom, she wonders what they're doing behind the door. Sleeping, waiting, or neither. And she comes to the conclusion that behind the door is nothing. Were she to open it, then they would appear, friendly as ever. This perfect picture waiting for her. But until then, nothing. It's like she knows this world is a kind of simulation, a simulation that takes effort to maintain, leading the other mother to focus her energy on creating only what Coraline needs to see in that moment. The black cat compares it to a spider's web, saying how they only need to be big enough to catch flies. And it's like the movie takes this line and bases the design of the other world around it, at least when it begins to reveal its true form. The floor itself falling away to form a cobweb, where Coraline is directly in the center, the fly caught in this trap. In fact, the other mother even begins to look like a spider. She may begin looking almost identical to Coraline's real mother, but as the story progresses and her mask begins to slip, her form changes. It starts subtle, with slightly longer limbs and sharper features, like she's being stretched. But by the end, she's a full-blown spindly monster, with needles for fingers, multiple legs, and a protruding back like a web sack.
You know I love you.
It's really bold character design, which is perfect for a movie. Whereas in the book, everything we learn about the other mother's appearance, we learn through Coraline's descriptions. Remember, when Coraline first sees the other mother, she describes her as having paper white skin, she's taller, thinner, fingers too long. Although she still says how she looks a little like her real mother. But during their final interaction, Coraline notes similar traits, just with way more exaggeration. Her skin is as white as a spider's belly. She's so tall, she's nearly brushing the ceiling. Her teeth are sharp as knives. And Coraline wonders why she ever thought that this creature looked similar to her mother. And I really like this approach, because there's a lot more ambiguity. Has the other mother always looked this horrific, or is Coraline just getting better at seeing the other mother for what she really is? Because I think someone's actions and personality can affect the way they look, or more specifically, the way that you view them. When Coraline knew nothing about this woman, she thought, oh yeah, she kinda looks like my mum. But as she learns more about her and how much of a monster this creature is, she begins to see her as just that, a monster. But because we're only learning of her appearance through Coraline, we will never really know what she truly looks like. So neither one of these transformations are more effective than the other, they're just different. Effective in their own ways, playing into the strengths of their art forms. But while the movie does a fantastic job of showing this horrific transformation through character and environment design, and the book does a fantastic job of showing this transformation through ambiguous descriptions, unfortunately, when it comes to the third version of Coraline, the graphic novel, this transformation I felt was pretty weak. And I think overall, this version is probably my personal least favourite. And that's not to say it isn't good, but there are just a few things holding it back for me. So let's talk about it. Now, graphic novels are probably my favourite art form to experience a story through, because you get that page turning, the ability to take the story in at your own pace, like you do with a book, combined with the carefully crafted, striking visuals that you get with something like animation. And I almost expect better visuals than animation because it's a single frame, a single image, so you can take more time with it, and not have to worry about things like fluid movement, instead focusing on the details. You can get so creative with a graphic novel. The text, the spacing, the colours, and a great graphic novel will use all of these things to help emphasise the themes and emotions of the story. I mean, the simplest form of this would be a superhero story, like Kick-Ass, which I know is a comic, but same thing in my opinion. The artwork is so bold, with thick lines and intense colours, because it's a very violent and intense story with a lot of action. But graphic novels don't have to have bold artwork, they can also be softer and more subtle, like Watership Down, which I recently covered on this channel, a story about a group of rabbits trying to survive in the English countryside. So the illustrators used a lot of pencils and watercolours to get a more natural, softer look, to capture all of the subtle tones and textures you get with the English countryside. Or you have something like When the Wind Blows, which was written and illustrated by an author who was mostly known for children's books. So he made this look like a children's book too, with soft round shapes and overly cartoonish characters. But it isn't a children's book. It's about an elderly British couple who, after a nuke strikes their home, attempt to carry on living their lives like nothing is wrong, hoping that the government is on their way to save them, even though no one is coming and they're slowly dying of radiation poisoning. So this children's book style isn't just nice to look at, it helps to show this couple's innocence. And as the story goes on and they slowly realise what's happening, the visuals reflect this, the colour slowly draining from the page, as though the book itself is succumbing to radiation poisoning. I actually have a whole video on this movie if you want to check it out afterwards. But the point is, all of these graphic novels have art styles and creative choices which help to emphasise the themes of the story. And I just don't really see that here with Coraline. I'm going to show you 3 pages from the Coraline graphic novel. One from the beginning when Coraline is in the real, dull world. One from later on in the other world when Coraline is having a fun time being lured in. And one from the end when the mask has slipped and the other world is revealed for what it really is. And I'm willing to bet that you would not be able to tell which is which. And for a visual graphic novel, I think that's not a great thing. I mean, I can do the same thing with the movie and you instantly know where in the story each part takes place. But in the graphic novel, I couldn't even tell at points what the difference between the real world and the other world is even supposed to be. They're almost identical, at least with how they look. And I think it's made harder to feel the difference between these two locations by the fact that there isn't a lot of work put into the backgrounds, which is what can help a world feel lived in. It's such an underrated part of graphic novels and animation, and one of the reasons that the series Smiling Friends feels like a real world. In that show, they put almost more effort into the backgrounds than they do their characters. And it makes sense because the backgrounds take up a big portion of the frame. But in the Coraline graphic novel, there were quite a few points where there just isn't a background. And so it feels like the characters are just chilling in the void. It just makes it a little bit harder to gather a sense of depth in these images, and to tell where the characters are in relation to one another. Because these kind of simple gradient backgrounds 4 one-color backgrounds are found throughout the entire book. It's pretty hard to find a page without one, and it's not like a simpler background can't work. There's a panel from the Invincible comics which does a similar thing that I love, of characters floating in the sky against a mostly red background. But it doesn't feel flat because the characters are placed further and further back, meaning that even though the background is a single color, there's still a lot of depth in the image. It feels 3D. And obviously, it's not really fair to compare a graphic novel where we don't know the budget to a massive animated movie with so many people working on it. But I think with creative art direction, you don't always need a massive budget for a graphic novel, because it doesn't cost any extra to have vibrant colors in the other world, to have a more horrifying design for the other mother, whose design stays pretty consistent throughout the entire story. This is her at the beginning, and this is her at the end. And to be fair, even though a horrific transformation would have been nice to see, the other mother's design is pretty creepy at points. Like here, where she leans in and her face is cast in shadow, and she's taking up nearly a whole page. She feels so imposing. And that's what I'm talking about. It's simple, but it's using sizing and position to help emphasize the intended emotion at this moment in the story. The power that the other mother holds over Coraline, who we see on the next panel looking tiny in comparison. It's great, and don't get me wrong, there were several parts that I really enjoyed, like this panel here of Coraline dreaming about the rats singing. The colours are really bold and vibrant, the spacing is really great, it looks like a poster. I just wish there was more of this kind of thing, because again, this isn't even necessarily a detailed panel, the rats are silhouettes, but it's the colour, and more specifically the contrast between the bright and dark colours that make this panel pop. And I know it probably goes without saying, but the artist who illustrated this is incredibly talented. I had a look at his other work and it's phenomenal. It's really psychedelic, and right towards the end of the story, when the other world is unraveling, this is where his psychedelic style really shines through, and it creates by far my favourite visuals of the book. I just wish that the other world looked like this all of the time, but I do understand that this was released a year before the movie, and so it's easier to retroactively say the worlds should look more different after we have a movie where this is the case. So yeah, the graphic novel was okay, but it is probably my least favourite version of the three. Now, let's talk about the ending. So, after defying the other mother's request to have buttons sewn in as eyes, the other mother kidnaps Coraline's real parents and traps them in this other world.
Caroline says her parents have vanished quite completely.
What? Mom? Dad?
So Coraline builds up the courage and returns to the other world to save them, challenging the other mother to a game.
Why don't we play a game?
If Coraline can complete a series of challenges, then the other mother has to let her, her parents, and anyone else she's trapped here go free. But if she fails, then Coraline must stay here forever and agree to have buttons sewn in.
And I'll let you sew buttons into my eyes.
But fortunately, Coraline manages to pull this off, completing the challenges, before tricking the other mother into unlocking the door back home so she can distract her and escape. So she's back home, and the other mother is trapped in the other world where she belongs. She's got her parents back. They're actually less stressed now because their hard work has paid off. And her and Wyborn seem to finally be on good terms.
I'm glad you decided to stalk me.
Now, from everything we know about the real world, how grey it is, how dull it is, you might think that by Coraline returning to it, it would almost be a sad ending. But remember, appearances can be deceiving. We spend so much of the movie focusing on the other world and learning how it's much worse than we thought. But by the end, we also learn that the real world is much better than we first thought. It's not as simple as real life bad, dream world good, because what kind of lesson would that be? And what kind of ending would that be? Yay, Coraline, you made it out. But now you've got to spend the rest of your life in this boring reality where you feel neglected, the same reality that you wanted to leave in the first place. Yippee! Bear in mind that this is a book aimed towards kids, and a book written by an author for his own children. And so I think it's important that Coraline realizes that the real world isn't so bad, and that maybe her real parents aren't so bad. And so the story ends on a happier note, with Coraline going out of her way to try and make connections with her neighbours. And she realizes that while the eccentric man who lives upstairs may keep calling her by the wrong name, it never even occurred to Coraline that this man even had a name. So the next time she sees him, she addresses him as his name, Mr. Bobo, and like she did before, corrects him on her name, Coraline, not Caroline.
Coraline.
And what do you know, he finally takes a moment and gets it right. He calls her Coraline. It seems like a small gesture, but it's a good sign that Coraline finally belongs in this world, in reality. And all she had to do was take the first step. And while the movie's ending may not have this wholesome moment between Coraline and her neighbour, I mean, they do talk, but he still addresses her as Caroline.
They tell me that you are savior, Caroline.
The moral of the story comes through in its own way. For one, the clouds and rain are on their way out. And not only this, Coraline, her parents, and all of her neighbours have gathered together to plant flowers in the garden. So it seems like more colourful days are ahead. The real world is finally starting to look like Coraline's dream world. But the big difference is that here, it doesn't feel fake. The flowers don't just appear out of thin air, they're being individually planted. Because in reality, it takes time and effort to make something look beautiful, to make your wishes come true. And it's a subtle detail, but I love how they make sure to mention how it's actually Coraline's idea to plant all of these flowers.
Thanks for helping me, Miss Spink. Miss Forcible.
But the tulips look nice.
Because again, by taking this first step, it shows how Coraline has finally come to a realization that there isn't some magical world out there waiting for her. If she dreams of a different life, where the grass is greener, the food is better, with more fun and excitement and colour than her own, then it's up to her to try and bring these things into her reality through her own actions. It's a great lesson for children, and anyone really. I probably need this lesson more now than I did when I was 10 years old. So once again, different endings, powerful and meaningful in their own ways. I didn't make this video with the intention of ranking these versions, I just wanted to show that the idea that the book did it better isn't always the case. I think a lot of people see books as the more sophisticated art form, when movies are just as sophisticated, they're just harder to make. You have so many people involved, all these spinning plates and schedules and budgets.
Every blade of grass has been painted or built. They've got rooms where they're painting trees.
It's like building a movie a molecule at a time.
But when it comes together, you can get a masterpiece like this. But I'm interested to hear which version other people prefer, the book, the movie, the graphic novel. If you're interested in the Coraline book, I've left an affiliate link in the description, which will take you to the Coraline audiobook. That's right, you don't even have to be able to read. There, you can get a free 1-month Audible trial, so if you're into audiobooks, then maybe check it out. It helps out the channel. And thank you so much for watching till the end, I appreciate it. Until next time.